Hi, this is Skip Stewart, Vice President and Chief Improvement Officer for Baptist Memorial Healthcare. This is the third of 4 videos that is a part of an overall Improvement Kata workshop. A kata is a routine you practice, so its pattern becomes an automatic habit that gives you some new skills. So if we're going to learn this skill, we'll have to practice. And we have people all throughout Baptist practicing this scientific thinking on a regular basis to hit really important goals. So there's the 4-step improvement kata model. One thing to bring attention to is it is an iterative process. Important step number 1, the challenge. A challenge is a strategic imperative. It's a game changer. It's not what we can work on, it's what we must work on. It's typically 52 weeks out into the future. Many times it's a multifaceted type of goal. Now each step is going to frame the next step. Important step number 2, current condition. Where are we at today in light of the 52-week challenge? Important step number 3, next target condition. The magic word there is the word next. It implies there will be multiple target conditions on your way to the challenge. So if the challenge is 52 weeks into the future, the next target condition is typically going to be about 2 weeks into the future. Important step number 4, PDSA. Plan, do, study, adjust. Or think of the word experiment. We are going to experiment through one obstacle at a time on our way to the target condition. And we call this a meta routine that stays the same regardless of the circumstances, a routine way of acting and thinking. So the way that we're going to turn these 4 steps into reality, into the way that we act and think, is through practice. Important step number 1, challenge. Important step number 2, current condition. Important step number 3, next target condition. Important step number 4, PDSA. And there's 3 things we want to bring attention to. You can't reach the overall challenge right away. The path to the target condition is not predictable or straight. As you're moving towards the next target condition by experimenting against one obstacle at a time, you're going to be making adjustments based on what you learn. But to operationalize this, so that we get into this practicing, to operationalize this, we have to have the coaching kata. And we'll talk much more about that in the workshop. We've talked much about this phrase, pattern of work. And I've encouraged you to think about, if you've ever watched or participated in athletics, you may have noticed how the players are playing the game. You may have noticed that certain players have unique characteristics and traits that are different from other players on a different team. A coach may eventually come in and draw a picture of how the team is playing the game. They may draw another picture of how they desire the team to play the game in the future. So that's a way to think about this phrase, pattern of work. Now, in your own work, you might just think of, what is the current way that we're doing things? Important step number 1, challenge. It has 4 key points. Key point number 1, date in distant future. Key point number 2, desired pattern of work. Key point number 3, metrics. Key point number 4, start with one focused process. Important step number 2, current condition. It has 5 key points. Key point number 1, actual pattern of work now. Key point number 2, process characteristics now. Key point number 3, current process metrics now. Key point number 4, current outcome metrics now. And key point number 5, understanding linkage of outcome metrics, focus process, and challenge. Important step number 3, next target condition. It has 5 key points. Key point number 1, date in near future. Key point number 2, desired pattern of work. Key point number 3, process characteristics. Key point number 4, process metrics. Key point number 5, outcome metrics. Important step number 4, PDSA. It has 4 key points. Key point number 1, against one obstacle of target condition, desired pattern of work. Key point number 2, list what is expected to happen. Key point number 3, list what actually happened. Key point number 4, reflect. What did you learn? We're going to go into the reasons for some of these key points. Important step number 1, challenge. Key point number 1, date and distant future. The reason is so that we understand the arrival time long term. Key point number 2, desired pattern of work. The reason is we need to know how we need to play the game to win. Key point number 3, metrics. The reason is we want to establish and measure the gap from the current condition to the challenge. Key point number 4, start with one focused process. The reason is this helps us narrow our focus and see obstacles more clearly. Important step number 2, current condition. Let's talk about the reasons for these key points. Key point number 1, actual pattern of work now. The reason is we need to understand how the game is being played today. Key point number 2, process characteristics now. We need to understand sources of variation and opportunities for standardization in the working pattern. Key point number 3, current process metrics now. The reason is we need to understand key effects of experiments on process metrics that are leveraging or driving the outcome metrics. Key point number 4, current outcome metrics now. The reason is we need to establish and measure that gap from the target condition to the current condition. And key point number 5, understanding linkage of outcome metrics, focus process, and challenge. And the reason is we need to ensure efforts are directional. Important step number 3, next target condition. Key point number 1, date and near future. We need to know the arrival time, short term. Key point number 2, desired pattern of work. The reason is we need to know how we want to play the game by the target condition date. Key point number 3, process characteristics. The reason is we want to define the factors that will enable the target condition working pattern consistently. Key point number 4, process metrics. The reason is we want to identify levers to produce the outcome metrics. And key point number 5, outcome metrics, we want to have confirmed arrival. We'll get more into important step number 4, PDSA, and the reasons in the next video. But remember, as we practice, we'll be creating these new pathways in our brain. Or as neuroscientists say, every time you think or do something, you are more likely to do it again because it writes and strengthens neural pathways. And we have folks all throughout Baptist creating this new way of thinking. So until next time, show me your thinking.